This is actually amendments and resolutions, so I won't spend a lot of time on it at all, and the majority, in fact, are amendments that will be covered by the Natural and Cultural Heritage chapter anyway, other than the very last one, which is the deletion of a tree, which was T270. But again, as that's a resolution to be dealt with at a later meeting.
We won't look at that today. That'll be next Friday. Yep,
that's the end of the presentation.
So that's the end of Central City.
That's the end of Central City.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Yanni, yeah.
I had a question on the trees. So page 36 of the S32, it's really, really sad reading. I encourage everyone to read it. We clearly have a crisis with our trees getting damaged by construction activity and utility installations. As local councillors for the Central City in terms of Hagley-Ferrymead Ward, we are constantly getting removed tree notices because the trees are in poor health. What I think is becoming apparent is the reason they're in poor health is because of the construction and other damage that's been caused by contractors. So Cramner Square, possibly there's not, but it may be that it's because of parking. So I just think we need to really think, I just really want to know that we've got an increased level of consenting for some of these activities so that the trees aren't being damaged. Understand if naturally they're in poor shape and, that's something we can't control. But page 36 and 37 just makes you want to cry when you read how our trees are being destroyed unnecessarily.
Great, thank you for raising that. So trees we'll be talking about in more detail next Friday, is that correct?
Well, the Natural and Cultural Heritage chapter 9, will be dealing with, on the agenda it says 11:35, which obviously we're running a bit late, so will be later today. I think Councillor Hanson's question was a general one. You're talking, but there are those same matters that go across the city. Okay. Did you want a response to that, or?
Yeah, I'd like to know what consenting requirements we can put in place to ensure that contractors are not unnecessarily damaging trees so that we're having to remove them.
So the Central City chapter, because of the way the Central City Recovery Plan works, can't protect street trees. So there are difficulties for us in managing effects on those street trees. We can protect individually listed trees on private property and trees in other public places like parks and reserves, but not so easily in street trees. And perhaps Shane can add to that.
Yep, and Paul.
Probably would be good to separate what has been contractor damage to what has been earthquake-related tree issues, because it's my understanding in the city centre a lot of the trees have been compromised by the effects of the earthquake, where they've snapped roots off. Yeah, so it would be good to understand if there is a problem with that contractors or that, as opposed to the earthquake damage and the ongoing earthquake damage to those trees. It'd be good to get an understanding so you can put a bit of balance into it. Yeah,
it's very difficult to get a balance on what's earthquake and what's contract. But contractor damage is quite evident because you can see torn bark, you can see ripped roots, you can see broken branches, whereas earthquake damage is, and until the tree moves in the ground, we don't know it's there. And it's been 4 years since February. Most of the trees that were destabilised were removed. We had a monitoring list which we monitored for 2 years. We didn't remove any of those trees, and after 2 years they are considered to be of a structurally sound nature again because they put on sufficient root growth. So in the central city, or actually anywhere in the city, we know what's contractor damage, but we don't necessarily know whether or not there's earthquake damage sitting under the ground until it becomes evident.
Right, thank you for that. So that now concludes the Central City, so thank you very much indeed for that presentation. We now move on to Cranford Basin, and we are running slightly late. This can go through till midday, and we will need to stop at midday prompt because we've got the wave event,
Yes.
and then we'll be back at 1 o'clock prompt to continue from wherever we've got to. So, Ivan, welcome to the table.
Thank you.
Cranford Basin, over to you.
Okay, so as an introduction, I've got Kimberly, who's been helping with this somewhere. Kimberly, there's Kimberly. And also in the audience, we have Samantha Webb from GHD, who's our geotech advisor, Bridget O'Brien, who's a senior planning engineer for wastewater and water, and I have Paul Dixon, who's our senior stormwater engineer from Asset Networks to do with drainage. Now, they're the three key technical constraints which I will describe very quickly as we go through this presentation. So what I'm going to cover today, or what we're going to cover, is what is being proposed, the reasons for supporting the proposal, and the statutory implications. And I'll say right up front, the area we're talking about is not inside the urban limits or the infrastructure boundary in the RPS, and it is not in the LERP. So it's inconsistent with the LERP at the moment, and it is not giving effect to the RPS. So we understand that, and Sarah, the organisation next door, has made that quite clear. So the area we're talking about is this one. Most of you will know it. It is an area which development has kind of circumscribed. It is, in policy terms, you wouldn't get a better part of the city for urban consolidation. But there are 4 constraints which have constrained its development in the past. The first one has been access. Cranford Street is a limited access road, but that will be solved once the Northern Arterial designation extension, or the extension of the designation, has been sorted out. So that is the designation you can see there up in the orange there. The other constraint has been flooding, and that is a stormwater ponding area, so we certainly don't want development in there. But the council has designated quite a large area there, shown in the solid green, as a stormwater detention area. Not all the properties have been purchased at the moment, but the hearings for both the designation on the Northern Arterial extension and the stormwater basin are on as we speak down at the YMCA. So those 2 constraints are potentially being addressed, and we could get some more technical information on that from Paul if we need to. The third constraint has been wastewater. The area is in what's known as the Northern Relief Sewer catchment, and that has been a long-term issue for the council or for the city because of the infiltration of groundwater getting into the pipes during heavy rainfall, and I think the earthquake has been munted them even more. However, we believe we've got a solution around that, which Bridget would explain to you if you want to hear details around that. The fourth one is the one that's probably most problematic, the constraint, and that's geotech. So the soils are largely peat, or a mixture of peat and sand, and that does put limits on the types of development that can go in there, and we've got Samantha Webb to describe that in more detail again if you want to hear more detail. So in summary, it's a good area for urban consolidation, but it's got these 4 site constraints. But the advice that we have so far and the work we've undertaken, we believe that we can probably accommodate some development around the edge of the basin itself. So that is the white hatched area on the screen or in your handout. That is the area we are looking at for residential development. As you start at this stage, we've got 2 or 3 submissions seeking development in parts of those areas that we have to respond to as part of the Stage 3 hearings on the replacement district plan. So what has been proposed? The solution that officers are suggesting is that to enable very low density housing on most of the land not required by the 2 NORs. And what we mean by low density is the Living 1B zone, which is currently in the plan and will be called Residential Suburban Peak Constraint Overlay in the Replacement District Plan. Now, these sections are 2,000 square metre minimum, so the half-acre sections. There are areas around the basin that have been so developed in the past. Taunton Green was the last. I'll show you some photographs of that in a minute. They have, those areas have sustained very little damage, if any, in the earthquakes, because most of the houses are all piled and the infrastructure has piled. But I do understand that there has been some damage to the infrastructure, but through ground settling. But I'm not sure whether that's, Bridget, because of the earthquakes or just ground settling. I'm not sure about that. Right. So that's what we're proposing, low density. Some land will remain as rural urban fringe until further geotech information is obtained, and the land being acquired for stormwater retention will remain as rural fringe until such time as it can be rezoned open space natural. So there'll be a map showing you that zoning pattern shortly. And there it is there. So you'll see some of that area is in the floor level area. But that's not most half of Christchurch is probably in that floor level area, so it's not a serious constraint. So the area there, which is enclosed by the red dotted line and the sort of orangey browny greeny colour there, that is the area that's been proposed for residential suburban peak constraint overlay zoning. And as I said before, quite a lot of it is subject to a submission from the landowners. And in fact, it's been subject to submission on a number of occasions. They submitted on proposed change 1 to the RPS, and these landowners submitted on the land use recovery plan. So this is not a new issue. The reasons for not zoning it are the 4 reasons I gave before. Yes, and in fact, and the uncertainty around the NORs, and of course those decisions still have to come out. So there's a little bit of uncertainty on those exact boundaries until the decisions on NORs come out. But I don't think they'll change really. What an NOR, sorry, notice as requirement.
The decision coming out.
Well, the hearings are now, so we would imagine the decision would come out in 2 or 3 months, hopefully. So the decisions should come in within the time frames that before we go to the independent hearings panel, hopefully.
So my immediate reaction to this, by allowing some development, I mean, my immediate concerns are around, what would be the technical category of the land. Obviously, it's susceptible to flooding. Is it also susceptible to liquefaction? Are we actually just repeating Flockton or Bexley all over again? And is this, in fact, for those reasons, a wise decision? And I mean, you'll obviously have some technical capability to back that up, some technical reports that would back that up and that give reasons for your decisions. And I'm guessing we'll be coming to that as you go through the presentation. That's correct. They are very important questions, but the land which we're rezoning is quite high. It's, as you can see, most of it's outside the floor level area. Some of it's inside, but just inside. But it is quite high, and it is beyond the area of flooding. So Paul can elaborate on that shortly, if you like, and give a bit of more information on that. Yeah, I mean, flooding would be one part of it, and then what we might think of as the Bexley issue would be the other. We know that land typically which is subject to flooding and low-lying and so on may easily also be subject to liquefaction and heightened earthquake risk. Absolutely. So I'll ask Samantha to address that question, but the land from the geotech report so far is not susceptible to liquefaction, as far as I'm aware, but Samantha can address that question in a minute. And the white areas that you've identified on the map, are they aligned with the areas that are subject to the submissions that you've talked about? Generally, I think a little bit more, aren't they? We've added a little bit more in to round it off, but there's a small area outside the area that's been submitted on. All right. Yep. Great. Thank you. But generally, I forget what the percentage is, Kimberly. I can't remember.
I think it's actually just the little wee sort of round circly bit at the on the right hand side. Was the only part that isn't subject to submission. To the right.
That's subject to submission.
That's submission, yep. 2 submitters there.
Yep.
The one
and around here.
And around there, that's all submission as well, and further down.
And down here.
And it's just that one on the far right side
Over
that all-
here.
Yeah,
That's already
but that's
rezoned.
already residential deferred
Yes.
currently in the plan.
It's already rezoned, not red zoned.
It's a residential deferred zoning, I think, in the operative plan.
In the current plan.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's in a nutshell what we're proposing. There is an outline plan which will go into the plan as well. So it's a very basic outline plan. It's really just where the parks might go or where the internal road network may go. Probably the key thing there is we don't. One possibility is to extend Grants Road through the Cranford Street, but I don't think would be a sensible idea. So it's basically a staggered thing here. Yeah. So there's Grants Road there. Just to give you a bit of there's Grants Road. Papanui Road's down here. There's Cranford Street. That's Kiwitu Drive. No, well, that was.
Can I ask,
Yep, Pauline, yep, sure.
would it, yeah, would it be an assumption that the stormwater pond would actually help to drain that whole area anyway? Would
Yes.
that be?
Would be the assumption. Any compensatory storage we put on that basin,
Right.
probably.
Okay, thanks.
And so there's a very basic outline plan, and just these are one or two photographs of this is Taunton Green. So there's quite like this here perhaps hasn't turned out as the attractive street frontage that we'd like. It's along Grasmere Street, opposite Nairis Place. But this is a sort of quite open, low density housing that you tend to get in these areas. So what it means is it reduces the weight on the peat. Basically it's that the buildings will be piled, and it's probably the compromise of making efficient use of the land versus not doing anything with it at all. So look, Samantha and Samantha and Paul come up, just sort of perhaps give a little bit of a brief on the stormwater and the geotech issues that we may have here.
Okay, great. Meanwhile, we've got a question from Yanni.
Yep.
So one of the things that is really important in Canterbury is versatile soils, and I note that it's really hard to see what assessment we've done around things like food security and the irreversible impact of developing on versatile soils. Is there a soil assessment for this particular area?
There has, not recently, it have been done in the past, and they have been classed as versatile, horticultural versatility too, but basically we have a report there that says that farming is just not economic, and the landowners there have been struggling to make farming a goer there. They get flooded out, they don't get flooded out, they get noise complaints from the neighbours because of bird scaring or other things going on there, they get vandalism. So the cases have been there for a long time, and they've been seeking rezoning since at least 2002, because of the fact that it's just such hard work making their operation viable.
The flooding, I thought we had other work that addressed the flooding issues. So when that work's finished, we're not going to have flooding to the extent. I mean, we've been to the High Court and we've got agreements and stuff. So if the flooding issues were fixed, because it seems like there's been too much development up top and not enough stormwater capacity, would you think that these soils would still be productive?
No, not in an economic sense. In fact, we've rezoned hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of versatile soils around the edge of the city to residential with under the current planning regime. So it's be pretty inconsistent if we decided this 50 hectares would be protected for versatile soils, given that what's been rezoned so far.
And I think the issue too is that the Cranford Basin, as we all know, is surrounded in residential. And the only reason it was left out of what was previously called the metropolitan urban limits were the 4 environmental factors that Ivan has touched on. They they will be dealt with through the notices of requirement, and we've done further testing on that high standing land. And then with the fact that keeping 50 hectares, which is subdivided up into several different owners, farming then becomes non-viable. This is why we're bringing it to you now. The intention to change the regional policy statement maps and the land use recovery plan, the process for that would be a council submission to the land use recovery plan.
So just before Samantha and Paul deal with those two issues, now the three reasons: rural uses are not viable, so that really, Councillor Johansson, that addresses your point really. Commercial and commercial industrial activities are appropriate. Because of, well, they're so close to a key activity centre, and the low density reflects some serious local constraints. Now, in a normal scheme of things, this area would be up for medium residential development because it's pretty close to, it's quite close to the KAC at Papanui, so you'd normally have your medium density around here. But the scenario testing we've done means that it's just not, it would not work, and it would be very risky. And there are some, just to round off on Brigitte's point, so the land is outside the priority area for infrastructure. The density isn't consistent with intensification around the KACs, as I've just said. It does not meet the density requirements of new greenfield priority areas, and there is need for integrated decision making around the notices requirement, the alert review, and the decisions of the IHP. So there are some process issues to work through here that they're not insurmountable, and the UDS, we are engaging with UDS partners as we go through this process. So I'm just wondering whether...
Okay, we've got a question from Paul.
Sorry, yep.
Just to clarify, so there are infrastructure constraints to allow this to actually intensify? Is that basically what you said?
No, there were constraints, but they are being overcome, and I'll get Bridget to explain that. Sewer is the main one. The drainage one, we believe, is Paul will say, I think that's largely dealt with. The traffic is dealt with. I think that the sewer is dealt with to allow at least this density of development. So and traffic, there are local effects which are relatively minor at this density. So they've all been largely dealt with. But I mean, that's why I've got the staff here to answer those questions in more detail.
So maybe if we hear from Bridget, that might address some of these concerns.
Yes, sure.
Right, so basically the most of the area, so that large chunk on the left-hand side, and if you want to just bring back the map of what's proposed, the proposed planning map, please, discharges into, so the big block on the left is...
Here's the pointer.
Oh, sorry. Which one? That one?
This little band.
That one there. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So this block here discharges into the northern relief sewer, which is already constrained, so it discharges sort of down the bottom end here. So we've already got major capacity constraints in that sewer, and overflows at that point, what's known as the Grassmere overflow, overflows into Dudley Creek. So that already happens in basically once a year, and any addition of extra wastewater will just make that worse. We do have a project in the draft long-term plan for an upgrade, quite a major upgrade to the northern relief, so probably putting in some sort of storage facility at that point to store the wastewater during storm events. But that's not due for completion until 2023, so we need to be quite sort of careful about how we manage this in the meantime. What we're looking at is probably, because of the ground conditions and the capacity constraints, we'd probably look to make this a pressure sewer system area, with every house having its own pressure sewer pump pumping into network. Yeah, any new houses, yeah. Any existing houses will be either connected to the council network or dealing with on-site, I'm not sure which. So because that allows us much better control over the flows into the network, and it's a much tighter system, so we'd get a lot less in the way of inflow and infiltration coming into the network. So that's what we're proposing for that large block. The smaller block here, this one here, the Case and Crozier sites, would actually, they discharge into a different catchment. So this is the pump station 6 catchment here, so they'd connect in to these streets here. There's some pipework capacity limitations further downstream, just upstream of pump station 6, that we'd need to upgrade as a result of this. Otherwise, we're going to have extra manholes overflowing in the street during a storm event. So we'd need to upgrade probably about, give me a second. We'd need to upgrade about 120 metres of pipe to accommodate the increase in flows. So that's what's proposed from a wastewater perspective. The area is also a bit constrained from water supply, and we'd need to construct a new water supply pump station to service the site as well, and that would probably be somewhere around here. I haven't done the cost yet. All we've done is work out how we could service it, but yeah, I'm certainly aware that there'd be additional costs associated with this that we're not so while the wastewater we've already got a planned project in place, and it would just be a matter of increasing the size of that project to take into account the increased flow. So instead of the storage being this big, it would be slightly larger, for example. But in terms of water supply, I don't think we've got a planned project for a new pump station there yet.
Right, that would be. We must know how much it costs for a metre of pipe.
We do. I mean, I can come back to you on that if you want to know.
I'm just kind of interested. Is it millions? Is it a few hundred thousand? Is it?
I think it's more like a few 100,000.
Right.
But yeah, I'd need to confirm.
And the water would be obviously a lot more significant because you're building a new pumping station. Yeah,
so it's a new pump station. And again, I'd need to come back with you with a ballpark figure if you wanted to know.
I think that'd be really useful for us.
Yeah. Yeah, happy to provide that.
Yeah, great. Yeah, if we can get that further information, that would be
I'd just be
excellent.
interested for both sides, so separately costs of the infrastructure.
What, so the big block on the left versus the smaller one on the right? Well, we've considered them as a whole, and I think the water supply pump station would serve the whole area. Right. It would be part of the new St Albans water supply zone. So the way it's been considered so far is just what would it take to service the whole area.
Except that that feeds into a different catchment for the stormwater.
Oh, that's for wastewater?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I can certainly give you a separate price for that pipeline upgrade, for sure.
Great, thank you. Now, we've got about 5 minutes before we get to 12 o'clock, and I am keen to be wrapped up just a couple of minutes before 12 so that we're ready for that wave presentation. So that just gives us a few more minutes now before we need to finish for lunch. Pauline, yeah.
Preparing a submission to the Loop on this?
We will be.
We will be. Thank you.
Ivan, do you have anything else?
Well, I've just got Samantha here and Paul as an opportunity to ask Samantha about geotech. I mean, it is, there are some geotech challenges, we accept that, and Paul for these stormwater drainage. But so they're there. I think there'll be a good opportunity to get information from these experts.
Okay, now is it worth starting that now, or would we be better to leave that until after lunch, do you think, given that we've only got probably 3 or 4 minutes now to do that? We might be better to let that be the first thing we do after lunch.
Yes, Samantha can't come back after lunch, so it'd be best to hear
All right,
what she has to
let's
say.
go really quickly now, but we literally do have only 4 minutes to complete this. So,
I can do this reasonably
yep,
quickly.
great.
Someone mentioned, is this the next Bexley? Is this the problem? What would be the TC zoning? The site is generally underlain by up to 4 metres of peat, and below that are reasonably, what we'd say, moderately dense to dense sands and gravels. So the liquefaction risk is low. We'd probably be on a TC2 type zoning. The issue with the development of this area is not really a liquefaction prone issue. It's how do we geotechnically work with the peat, because peat is compressible. It's subject to compression from water change movements. So the issue in terms of the understanding foundation requirements and infrastructure development is related to peat and the properties of the peat rather than liquefaction. So properties would probably would need to be piled. and we'd need to look at the infrastructure, how to manage the infrastructure and any longer term consolidation of the peat.
Can I just clarify though that there are areas like this all through the city, are there not, that have peat?
Oh, there are, yes.
Yes, so it's not
this
an
is
unusual
unique.
factor.
So St Albans is an area that has peat underlain by it. This has probably larger thicknesses of peat than the other areas, in fairness to this is a peat, true peat layer that we're dealing with here, as opposed to organic silts and peats interbedded. But from a foundation and development point of view, it's there are technical solutions that overcome that ground type.
Great, thank you. Pauline.
Any model that shows how long term those solutions are or are not? How durable?
How durable? We have proposed to undertake, so there's some what we call consolidation testing that we can carry out on the peat to try and assess how much the peat can consolidate. But the issue is really to say you've got the peat, we have to develop below the peat because the peat behaviour is unpredictable. But no, there are no long-term models.
Is it fair to say that it's actually not ideal land for developing housing on?
You can always develop housing on any land. It's about the technical, it's about the money that you throw. It requires an expensive foundation.
Okay. We probably should wrap up at this point because we've got the wave people outside. Thank you very much. So we'll adjourn the meeting now and we'll be back at 1 o'clock to continue with the agenda.
You want to continue with this? Okay.
Yeah, so if we just continue where we're leaving off now at 1 o'clock. Thank you.